Hello, everybody. This is Burl Schwartz from City Pulse. And ever since the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, the city of Lansing has been engaged in a growing discussion of how to deal with racial justice and equity, how to deal with the police budget, and something called defunding. And we're going to talk today to someone who was very much involved in the city's response and shaping what she has called a roadmap on these issues. She is Teresa Bingham, a Lansing-based attorney, and I'm very excited to get to know her better today. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. It's great to meet you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Same here. So as I was doing some research, I discovered we have something in common. I spent a few years in Oklahoma in the early 90s, and as publisher of a statewide magazine called Oklahoma Today. So I got into most cities and towns and villages, including one called Perry, Oklahoma.
Oh my goodness, my heart.
Northwest of Stillwater.
Yes.
And Stillwater's not exactly a big city. When I looked at the population of Perry, I saw it was 5,126 souls in 2010. I'm very interested in knowing what it was like for you growing up there, particularly as an African American.
Absolutely, Mr. Schwartz. I'm glad that you've had the opportunity to visit my hometown. And I'm very familiar with the publication for which you worked, excellent publication. And growing up in Perry, Oklahoma was a very unique experience in that, although there were very few African Americans and people of color, we had a very close-knit town. It was an opportunity for me to not only receive a very quality education, because education is at the core in Perry, Oklahoma, but an opportunity to establish relationships from people of different races, mostly Caucasians. However, that was a very rich experience because people in Perry were very open and engaged in talking about our differences and using those differences to become stronger together. I have friends from Perry with whom I'm still close to, talk with, hang out with, and on Facebook, and very much thankful for that upbringing that I had in Perry. People would think a rural town in Oklahoma, how could a Black person possibly fit in there? Well, we fit in. I'm from a family of 7, and we had not only a quality education, we also had access to extracurricular activities. Band was my #1 activity. I'm a drummer, so I got a chance to play in, the marching band, the concert band, jazz band. And so I thank God for the upbringing that I had in Perry, Oklahoma.
Tell me about your family then. What did your parents do, and what have your siblings done?
Absolutely. My parents were very grounded in faith and in focusing on excellence for their children. I'm the youngest of 7. We all went to college. That was a conversation that took place early and often. And so they did an excellent job raising us. My father was a deacon of the local Baptist church, probably for most of his life. His family was instrumental in founding that particular church. And my mother's family was active in the Church of God in Christ. So as children, we had an opportunity to attend either church. We attended the Church of God in Christ mostly because they were very lively. They had music, they had bands, and it was just a more engaging experience. However, we did enjoy visiting my father's church on special days and holidays.
Well, that's great. And I know you're a member of Union Missionary Baptist Church. Were you raised as a Baptist?
Yes, I was raised as a holiness, as we call it, the Church of God in Christ. However, my husband, who was raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was raised as a Baptist. And so we chose to become members of a Baptist church, both when we lived in Oklahoma, in Norman, Oklahoma, and also when we moved here to Lansing. And so my husband is one of the ministers at Union Missionary Baptist Church as well. And Dr. Melvin T. Jones is our role model.
Then it
He's
does
a
behoove you to
wonderful
be a member since your son works there. I want to, well, you mentioned Norman. I lived in Norman, a charming town, and probably somewhat like East Lansing in the sense of probably being more liberal than the state at large. But I remember the law school well. I actually took the LSAT while I was there. Was not, it didn't turn out to be my path. But I was there in the early 90s. I know you graduated in the 80s, but you were there, I believe, at the same time as Professor Anita Hill.
Yes, I was there in the early 90s. I graduated from law school in 1988, and my first job was with the district attorney's office. And not only was Anita Hill my law professor, she remains a very good friend. We stay in touch. I call her Anita Faye. And the last time I saw her was last year. We just happened to run into one another at a hotel in Washington, D.C. I was there for one of my sororities events, and she was there to speak at Georgetown. And so it was a great opportunity to just reconnect and continue to reminisce.
She is certainly one of the most high-profile African-American women, and high-profile woman regardless of race. But how has she influenced you?
She has influenced me in so many ways. First of all, we have the same upbringing in terms of the environment. Anita Faye grew up in Okmulgee County, and not a specific town, but Okmulgee County, very small community. And if you can imagine, even smaller than the town of Perry.
Yeah.
But we have that upbringing. We both attended Oklahoma State University, not at the same time, but we both attended Oklahoma State University. And when she became a law professor at the University of Oklahoma, I believe she was the second African-American law professor. The first one, Dr. David Hall, who is now president of a university in the Virgin Islands, the second being Anita Hill. And I can tell you, Mr. Schwartz, I recall the day that I met Professor Hill. My friend Tammy Kemp, who is now a judge in Dallas County, and I were at my locker, and one of the professors brought Anita Faye to us because they were going to the dean's office, and he stopped right there and he said to us, "I've got you one." And we looked at one another, and Anita looked at us, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be quite a journey for her. And so we introduced ourselves, and she warmly greeted us, and immediately we connected with her. She became our Black Law Students Advisor for our BALSA group, and became very close to us, and was not only one of our champions, but became a friend, and as I said, continues to be a friend. Great supporter. Every time I've made a job change, I have talked with Anita Hill, and we have talked through it. In fact, my move to the Attorney General's office to work for the new Attorney General, Jennifer Granholm, was partly Anita's idea. She called me and she said, "Teresa, you have your first female Attorney General. I don't know her, but I have friends who know her. She's an amazing person. You need to send your resume and think about working for the Attorney General's office." And so I did some exploration, and it was very hard to even get noticed during those times because everybody wanted to work for the first female Attorney General. But I have a sorority sister who worked there who put my resume forward in front of the deputy assistant AG, and he was impressed and said that I believe the general would want her in the interviewing pool. And the rest is history.
So that's what brought you to Michigan in 1999, I believe.
1997. And what brought me to Michigan, or who brought me to Michigan, is my dear husband, Lloyd. Lloyd was prepared to pursue his doctorate degree, and he had previously attended Oklahoma State, where we met, and HBCU in Oklahoma, Langston University. Did you know about Langston when you lived in Oklahoma? So he was a graduate in urban education at Langston. And he had a professor who told him about Michigan State and Michigan. And so Lloyd discussed that with me, and I thought, okay, I don't know much about Michigan, but I hope that you explore it, thinking that he would choose someplace else like University of Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And so he very thoughtfully explored it and came back to me and said, Teresa, I think I want to go to Michigan State. He applied, he was accepted, and I came here kicking and screaming. I just have to be truthful about this. I did not want to leave my family. I did not want to leave my job, and I did not want to leave my friends. However, my father, who was alive at the time, I called to talk with him about it, thinking he would take my side, but he just very gently said, in his own way, he's always such a calm and gentle gentleman, Teresa, you're married to Lloyd, you love Lloyd, the two of you have had that conversation, told him to explore, you need to move with him and make the most of it when you get there. Mm-hmm. So here we are.
Yeah, you should make the most of it.
I've done my best, but I want to tell you another connection that's interesting, how people are connected in so many ways. The president of Oklahoma State University was Lawrence Berger at the time, Boger, B-O-G-E-R, Lawrence Boger. And he was friends or had worked with an individual who worked at MSU. In fact, he used to be the provost at MSU. And so there was a connection there. And then also one of Lloyd's professors, Dr. Mary Lee, as I call her, Mary Lee Davis, was very fond of Dr. Boger, had worked with him and for him when he was provost. And so she took very special interest, not only in Lloyd, but in myself. So Mary Lee has been behind many of my endeavors in Lansing. She introduced me to many of the leaders in Lansing when we first arrived in the legal community, and also very powerful women who live in the Lansing area. So I'm just very grateful for those connections and for how people have been able to pour into our family in such a loving way. And so Michigan is our home. We're very pleased to live here. Our children went to school here, and this is our home.
Yeah, I guess I'm tempted to jump right in then to how you see this roadmap for Lansing that will make this a wonderful home for more people.
Yes, first of all, I have to say that I'm just very grateful to Mayor Schor for this opportunity. I know that this is an assignment that is bigger than you, me, the mayor, the whole community. The way I see this roadmap working is that it will be community inspired. Some of my friends often say, Teresa, you act like you're still living in Perry, Oklahoma, small town. So that small town upbringing has benefited me in a way to where I believe in the power of a community coming together and working together for positive change. I believe in open dialogue among people in the community, regardless of their race, cultural situation, or their background. So this roadmap will consist of all of those views. Now, we all know that we could talk about this forever and maybe not lead to any types of solutions, but we have an opportunity to have positive results because of the individuals who are part of this forward movement. The advisory committee that has been appointed, you've seen the list of community leaders who have proven results in their various sectors industry sectors, as well as people who have continually given back to the city of Lansing. Although most of the members are Black Americans, we do have some diversity and some very strong, talented, gifted voices. So in order for this roadmap to come together, it takes all of us. I know it's going to happen because I've lived in Lansing for over 20 years, and I know that Lansing is very much the type of community that bonds in a way that they need to ensure that the city is as great as it could be.
I know Andy Schor well. I think he's a good man, and but I think he has not addressed problems that were right there in front of him, some of his own making, some I want to discuss, I think, of some political making that he can't control. But there seemed to be a disconnect in City Hall between people who have been saying many of the things we've heard loud and clear since George Floyd died about problems in this community. And should it take people marching in the streets and sitting on his front lawn to get this kind of attention?
Sure. Mr. Schwartz, you mentioned something that I'm glad that you mentioned, because that's a question that I have received from several people. But this is how I see it. This is a unique time in our history. There have been many mayors before Mayor Andy Schor, and there has not been a racial justice and equity plan advanced in any way. So while it may be seen as being reactive to the times, the important part is that he has embraced this opportunity and he is leading an effort that has not been done before in Lansing. The question of whether it takes the protest and people speaking out against him to get to this point, I can't say that that's what led to this point. It's a national issue. While the concerns are similar, there are a few different concerns in Lansing. And so I have to applaud the mayor for stepping up in this way when no one else has done that, with or without a protest.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the politics of this, because we are reporting in City Pulse today that former Mayor Virg Bernero told our columnist Kyle Malin that it's 50-50 that he would run for mayor again. And Mayor Bernero has been outspoken only on issues of race concerning the mayor's office. Is there a risk here that someone is going to use this moment for political reasons and actually make the situation worse rather than better by dragging it through a political campaign?
Sure, Mr. Schwartz, I just want to clarify what you mean by if someone would use it for political reasons. Are you speaking about former Mayor Bernero?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you know politics well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much about you, but I know you know politics well because of where you work and where you have worked. Who knows what could happen in a political situation? But here's one thing that I know. We have to get out of the political stance in order to make this particular process successful. So if anyone chooses to use this for political reasons, I believe it's a mistake. Mayor Bernero had an opportunity to have his own roadmap to address racial justice and equity. It was an issue back then. It remains an issue now. And now that we have this important process in place, while we may not be able to guard the entire process from politics, we will certainly remain focused on our goals here. And our goals include having a racial justice and equity plan in place, and also addressing more issues that lead to police reform. We want the community to not only provide input and be a part of this, we want the community to help us protect the progress that we make in this area. So sure, I've been in politics for a long time, and I know that you could wake up one morning and everything could change from a political perspective. But I do want to say that we will do all within our power to protect this very important process from politics.
And let's talk about the process. You've had a listening session on racial equity and justice, and you're going to have another one of those, I believe, August 20th, and then on between now and then, on August 6th, I believe, you're going to have one on the police budget, presumably on the defunding issue, which I think we need to unpack. But in your first session on racial equity and justice, what did you hear that you think will be useful in developing this roadmap?
Yes, what I heard is that the people who joined us, we had over 100 people during that first town hall meeting, but the people who joined us were engaged in making sure that we knew that there are issues related to race in Lansing that we need to pay attention to. Some of the participants shared their stories shared their experiences with us, and we have taken note of each of those. I also heard that there are people who understand that the city and the police department, under the leadership of Police Chief Darrell Green, are doing some positive things and making strides toward police reform. And they support that effort, yet they want to see more. And they will see more, because we will continue to examine the policies, practices, and procedures inside of City Hall and also within LPD under the leadership of the Police Commission. So that's what we heard in general. We have actually processed that input, and we're continuing to make it part of the continuum of data and information that we will receive over the next couple of months in order to provide it to the advisory committee to start shaping that into this racial justice and equity plan.
And coming up on August 6th, you will ask people about the police budget. Defunding is a term now that is widely used, but I think perhaps widely misunderstood. Realistically, can the police budget be cut significantly because inevitably it may well mean fewer officers on the street? Is that in anyone's best interest?
I don't think so, but I don't get to make that decision. Yeah. I know the importance of public safety in communities. I know that taxpayers expect the police to protect them. Now, whether there's any type of way to adjust the budget to where some of the funds are used for non-police types of issues. You're aware of the fact that the police department has a social worker that is part of their force. And that is an example of how they have shifted some funds for non-police types of matters. So I believe that this upcoming discussion about the police budget will give us further insight on what the public is interested in seeing. You know, this defund word is different. When I first heard it, my reaction was, how can you take all of the money from public safety and expect to keep a community safe and stable? And I'm now finding that there are different definitions of defund depending on who you talk with. So we're very interested in talking with the community and hearing how they define defund and what their expectations are about adjusting the police budget.
An officer, a Lansing police officer last week in City Halls broke rank, so to speak, and gave us a letter in which he said basically he doesn't disagree there is a national problem with policing. He just doesn't think it's a big problem here in Lansing. And he's a police officer. Is he missing something? He's a minority as well, as a matter of fact, of Hispanic, Puerto Rican descent, I believe. Is he missing something, or is this simply a big city problem that isn't really a huge issue for Lansing?
Sure, I'm not really able to assess his position, but I will say he's worked within the police department and he has his perspective, and there will be other perspectives inside and outside the police department, all of which we will listen to. I will say that I have experience working with police officers, having been an assistant prosecutor in Oklahoma, having worked in the criminal division for a period of time at the Attorney General's office, having been general counsel for a state narcotics bureau in Oklahoma. I've had a lot of access to police officers. Michigan State Police, working with them as their policy point person when working for the governor. And one thing that I know is that there are many police officers, most of the police officers, I would dare say, are very committed to doing their job well. They respect the public, they obtain the necessary training, and they make every effort possible to do their job well. While we have seen police misconduct throughout the nation, that does not comprise of the majority of the police. So they should not all be judged by the acts of few. And those few who violate the law should be made accountable for that. But for me, as a taxpayer and a citizen, I want to have police officers in place to provide safety for the community in which I live, my neighborhood, my family, myself. So the commentary by the police officer, like I said, should be fully assessed and listened to, and we should listen to the perspectives of others as well, and not judge everyone by the acts of a few bad actors.
You sound quite moderate. Is that going to cause Black Lives Matter to start demanding your resignation, as it has done with Mayor Schor?
Well, I may sound moderate, but I don't describe myself as that way. Very reasonable, very common sense type of person. Black Lives Matter is a very powerful movement nationally. And I'm very proud to not only support that movement, but I've been involved on the national level through one of the organizations with which I'm associated. I have assisted in writing a plan that educates youth about law enforcement and also educates them about how to effectively change policies, practices, and procedures. So if they call for my resignation, I can't prevent them from doing that. But here's one thing I know. I've made a commitment to follow through on this assignment. I have always followed through on any assignment that I've been given, both within the workplace and also within my private practice. So I plan to stay here, and I plan to continue to focus on inclusion. We invite them to be a part of what we're doing. I will also focus on transparency. You can ask me anything about what's going on, and I will be transparent with you, as will the others who are involved in this effort. And also, I will be laserly, just like a laser beam, focused on positive results. So if there's noise in the background, I'm an attorney, have been since 1988. I've heard a lot of noise. I've been involved in politics since 1985. I've heard a lot of political noise, but it has not taken me off of my path. And more importantly than anything, I'm grounded in my faith And I truly believe that God has placed me here to assist the city with this effort, and I'm going to continue to follow through.
I know we're about out of time. I did want to ask you, though, the mayor has committed to hiring a diversity officer. Why is this necessary? Shouldn't diversity be a priority for the Human Resources Department and indeed every leader of city government?
That should be a priority for everyone. But if there is a equity officer, diversity officer in place, that gives the city an opportunity to have someone to focus on each and every issue through a diversity lens. While we would expect everyone to do that, that doesn't happen anywhere as far as I'm concerned, not consistently among all people. There may be a few people in the organization that have that focus, but by having someone focused on that, that I believe is not only a best practice, it's something that's very necessary.
And unfortunately, we are out of time. I would like to say I really appreciate your direct answers. It's refreshing. And I wish you the best of luck on this very important project. I hope we'll have an opportunity to update people on how it's going.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I appreciate City Pulse for having an interest in the project, and we look forward to having your support.
And thank you very much, everyone, for watching this. And we will be doing a story on Mrs. Bingman in the next issue of City Pulse. So you may find out even more there. For City Pulse, I'm Burl Schwartz.